Hello and welcome to Kingston Now. I'm Jimmy Buff. This week we'll look at the state of the local farmer with the group Friends of the Farmer. We'll talk reading and writing with Ulster Literacy Association, and we'll start with the Shop Local movement. Joining us now is Jennifer Schwartz-Berkey and Ajax Green from Rethink Local. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Now, when people say shop local, Rethink Local is more than shop local. But when people think shop local, and I think shop local, these days it's more of just like a bumper sticker statement without a lot of substance to it. How are you guys sort of working with that as an issue for Rethink Local?
Well, you're absolutely right. There's a lot more depth to the economic thinking behind this. First, we define the localism movement, what a local business is. 50% of the equity that owns that business must live in the Mid-Hudson Valley. And the reason that's important is we want the dollars spent at a locally owned independent business to stay here in the Mid-Hudson Valley. And Jennifer, in a moment, will talk about the study we're doing here, but the national data shows on average a dollar spent at a locally owned independent business will circulate in the community 300% more than if it's spent at a non-locally owned business. So that's a lot more economic activity and viability that we're creating, and we're not having to do anything other than to shift our shopping.
Now, when you say 50% of the equity, we acknowledge that, for instance, a local business that sells goods and services that are made elsewhere has to pay that whoever makes that, and that money goes elsewhere.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, one of the things, there's a term called Think Local First. There's a lot of discussion about, who originated that. I know an organization, a national organization we're a member of called the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies happens to own the trademark. Now, they've never enforced that. They're thrilled with anyone who uses it. But the term is Think Local First. Jennifer, none of us drove here today in locally made cars. The computers that are taping the show at this very moment were not made here in Kingston. And so there's a whole spectrum of economic activity. So the idea is every time you spend money, you're voting for the kind of community you want to live in. And so Think Local First is saying, well, really think about where you're spending that money and how that's going to impact your community. And, I'll turn it over to Jennifer because she can talk about the education components of what we're doing so that people really understand the importance of some of this.
And also address, too, for me, the difference between shop local and the idea of localism.
Well, I think Ajax did cover some of that in that localism is really about every layer of the community. It's about that every part of the supply chain, as Ajax was saying. And as we're trying to promote localism, the idea is that it's about the farmers, the artists, the craftspeople.
Well, but if for instance, you go to, there are very few places in Kingston where, and there are a few of them, where Art Riot comes to mind in Uptown Kingston, where everything in the shop, it's a locally owned shop, everything in the shop is made locally.
Right.
But unless that's the case, a lot of that money is going elsewhere.
Right.
I bought a toy at a locally owned toy shop last year, and because I wanted to shop local, I wanted to support the owner, but it was twice as much, not 10% more, twice as much as at Toys R Us. And then when I got home, I realized that a large amount of the money was going to the toy manufacturer wherever they were based and not locally.
Well, let's talk a little bit about pricing, because that's one of the things that frequently comes up. So, and now most of these studies are going to compare to sort of national chain stores. Well, first of all, oftentimes they'll do loss leaders that are very inexpensive to get people in the store, but studies have shown that once you're in that big chain store, that the pricing is not that dissimilar from local. Certainly in the pharmacy, we've certainly saw a dramatic reduction of independent pharmacies, but national research has shown that oftentimes they're actually cheaper than the chains. And then finally, one of the things I find incredibly powerful is, the National Association of Realtors, not a progressive thinking group of any sort, has done studies that show if your main street has a vibrant, locally owned independent business community, that property values are 54% higher. And so personally, I'll take my home being worth 54% more than I will care about discount on my toothpaste.
Also, people need to understand that the reason that prices can be so low at a chain is because the society is paying a lot of the costs, the externalities of the cost of shipping from China, the lack of payment for local labor and local labor laws that protect people, and that this funding that goes out of the community ends up costing us more in taxes. We end up spending more on our local education, on our local infrastructure, as a result of not being able to afford the kind of internally driven and locally strong and sustainable local economy. So I wanted to actually talk about our study.
Yeah, well, I want to get to that too. So Rethink Local, you've got two perspectives. You've got educating the consumers, but you also want to talk to the business community, and you have a study going on that you want their participation in.
So we're part of something called the Indie Impact Study, which is a nationwide series of studies that have taken place in places all across the country, especially in communities that are members of the Bali network, of which there are 80 different organizations that are localisms, like organizations like ours, with over 300,000 members. Is that right? Something like that. And these studies are finding not only that if you shift 10% of your spending, do you increase the flow of money in the economy, but for example, in Grand Rapids, 1,600 more jobs were created just by people shifting 10% of their spending, and $140 million added to the local economy as a result. So what we're doing is we're reaching out through our website, which is www.rethinklocal.org, for people to, now this is retailers, restaurateurs, anyone with a storefront who can in the 3 counties of Ulster, Dutchess, and Orange, who can participate in this study, so that the results can demonstrate that even in the Hudson Valley, this would be the impact if people shifted their spending.
Terrific. Well, it's you've got a good momentum going. There's a lot of awareness, more awareness of this now than there ever was before. So I'm hoping that people will participate and we can find out exactly what that means for us here in the Mid-Hudson Valley. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jim.
Great, thank you.
You're watching Kingston Now. Next up is Cassandra Bean from the Ulster Literary Association. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Kingston Now. The Ulster Literacy Association is a group that provides Ulster County residents with the tools they need to read and write. Here to tell us more is their CEO, Cassandra Beam. Hi, Cassandra.
Good morning, Jim.
How big of an issue is literacy in Ulster County?
It's estimated that 16,000 adults in our county alone are reading below a 5th grade reading level.
And that would be about 10% of the population, right?
It's a little bit higher, and nationally, it's about 20% of the population is considered to be functionally illiterate.
Now, is that because they haven't had the opportunity to learn to read and write? I assume that some of that is some learning challenges, maybe some dyslexia and stuff.
Absolutely.
But how much of that is just because people haven't had the access to the proper tools?
I don't think that there are studies that are that specific, but it's a combination of learning disabilities that go undiagnosed, family problems that prevent a child from participating fully in their free educational opportunities in this country, and people who are here from other countries.
So how does someone who can't read, who is functionally illiterate, how do they get along in the world? Are they just sort of faking it? How are they able to pass driver's tests and things like that?
Well, what's interesting about living without literacy and access to language is it's almost as if you don't have access to knowledge, and you're learning how to get around things indirectly. People who can't read they have excellent memories because they retain everything in their heads. They don't use a calendar, they may not use a phone, they don't know how to read a bus schedule or a label on a medicine bottle. So they have very good auditory skills and very good memories, but their lives are often extremely limited, and they just don't know about the world that they live in. because they can't go out there and experience it because they don't really know how.
And then there are the people who come to this country and don't speak English as a language that you guys work with too.
Yes, I would say that about 60% of our adult learners are from other countries at this point. It used to be 50-50, but it's tipping slightly. And they're from all over the world, and they range from people who didn't receive an education in their own country, and now they're struggling to get educated here, to people who have bachelor's and master's degrees who are just really concerned about conversational English. They want to learn how to talk to the American people and understand them and have them learn about who they are.
So how does Ulster Literacy go about teaching someone how to read and write who has spent a good portion of their life without those skills?
Well, the first step is that that student, that learner calls us and reaches out to us, and that's a very important moment. And we try to engage them immediately in our agency and in learning opportunities in small classes until they can be matched with a tutor. Our tutors are volunteers throughout Ulster County. They take a 20-hour training course, and then they become matched with one of the learners who's waiting. And that's how the program works.
And those tutors come from all different walks of life.
The only requirement to be a tutor is that you have your own high school equivalency exam completed and that you be 18 years old. So we do have a lot of very highly qualified tutors who are educators themselves, but we welcome diversity. We want people who are in recovery, we want people who are mechanically inclined, we want people who are, from all over, because that helps us serve a larger population.
Is there an overcoming of a stigma for people who know they can't read and write to come into the Ulster Literacy Association and say, listen, I'd really like to learn this?
It's a huge, huge gap for people. There's somebody in our community who's owned a very popular restaurant for 30 years, successful business person, they've taken care of their families. They came to us and admitted that they can't read, but they're in their 60s. So they've really taken a long time to get the guts, even though they're successful, to admit this and to ask for help.
And people should know, if they're watching and thinking, well, that might be me, is there is no stigma. There's no, and that there is an answer. People can teach you how to read and write.
Absolutely. And we don't ask how you got here. We just work with the learner from where they are. And our program is learner-centered. So we want to meet the goals that learner might have for themselves. They could want to get their driver's license, they could want to get their job, and all of the traditional things we think of. But we had somebody recently who said, I just want to write letters to my wife who is in a rehab, and I want to be able to spell right. So there's just a huge range of reasons why somebody comes to us and asks for that kind of help, short-term goals and long-term goals.
And it must be extraordinary to watch someone who has spent their life not able to read or write to make those first initial steps, to see that light in their eye when they read a sentence for the first time or write a sentence for the first time.
Not only that, but as an example, we have a learner who's been working for about 8 years with their tutor. Not all relationships last that long. And, he has now gained independence. He has his own apartment, he pays his own bills, he's got a girlfriend, he's got a job. Whereas 8 years ago, he was in a group home and he was, sort of trapped in a life that was very narrow. And so now he's fully engaged in the community, and he voted for the first time on Tuesday.
Outstanding,
So it's
outstanding
wonderful.
work, yeah. Well, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having me, Jimmy.
This is Kingston Now. Next up, we're going to talk local farming with Tessa Edick of Friends of the Farmer. You're watching Kingston Now. Friends of the Farmer is an organization dedicated to the next generation of farmers and to raising funds and awareness in the community for educational programs while promoting commerce and access to local food sources. That's what you wrote, Tessa Edick, on your website. Tell me about that.
Yes, so Friends of the Farmer is an idea that started out of my food entrepreneur business, Culinary Partnership, which launches food products, which really came from an idea of launching products to the market from a company called Sauces and Love that I started in '99 and sold in 2010. And I realized quickly that when you're producing pasta sauce, if you source from locally or farms, it's a much bigger impact and better taste and better nutrition than buying from a can, say even from Italy, if it's 3 years old. So how do you get fresher food? How do you get more nutrition? And it put me into the space of thinking about the farmer and what they do and how we're disconnected from them. So the festival was an idea, becoming Friends of the Farmer.
Well, that's how this Friends of the Farmer started. It was a festival, Midsummer Festival, 2 summers ago, right?
Yes, in 2011, I started
In
a
Columbia
festival.
County.
Yes, in Columbia County at Copic Country Club. We started a festival. Friends of ours bought the country club and really just wanted a community center for people to be able to gather around this beautiful lake. And they started a farm-to-table restaurant, and we partnered together and put a festival together to bring awareness to where your food comes from and how important the farmer is in that chain. And somehow in our broken system of food, we've gotten so far away from that.
How many farmers do we have in this Ulster, Columbia, Duchess
We have
area?
hundreds. We have hundreds. I've only been to about 150, but there are hundreds. And there's all kinds. You know, there's livestock, there's dairy, there's vegetable produce, there's lumber, there's all kinds of farming that goes on. There's grain, you know. It's endless, really, if you start to think about your choices for food and living. They're all around you. You just have to shift your thinking out of the super big box way of thinking and go back into your communities.
That's a big challenge, making that shift for people, because just before the cameras rolled, you were talking about getting 300 million people, the population of America, to start shopping, you know, sourcing their food locally, which is it's a momentum that began 70 years ago with the introduction of the supermarket, right?
Right. So if we go back even further and think about victory gardens after the war and everyone planting their own food and celebrating their community, there's something in that we need to revitalize. We need to bring that back. And we've gotten so far away from our seed and soil, which is so important for nutrition, that we're fat, we're sick, we're thinking food is expensive, when really it's everything we need to survive. So Friends of the Farmer was a shift in saying, pay attention to where your food comes from. Meet your farmer. He won't dupe you. He won't trick you. He's going to grow from beautiful soil, beautiful food that leaves you full and satisfied. Isn't that really what you want, is to look and feel great because of nutrition?
But how does that translate to someone who has little time? They have to run to the supermarket and get something quick for dinner.
Well, you know, I say, when did we swap convenience for nutrition? So if it's important for you to be healthy, it's important for you not to miss a day of work or have your kids healthy, if it's important for you not to spend all your money on supplements and diets and doctor visits, then I don't know, how do you value it?
So being a friend to the farmer, your organization, what does that entail?
So a Friend of the Farmer is sourcing from the farm, going to these farms. Not only is it a much more amazing experience than going to a supermarket, you meet people that make your food, you understand how it's made, you understand the importance of nutrition. The kids have a great time when they go to the farm. You can climb the tractor, you can dig in the dirt. You have this connection of your food source. It's so important. It's fresher, it tastes better. It's easy to do once you make the shift. But you have to understand that you're not going to go to the supermarket and spend all that time parking and in a line and rolling down aisles figuring it out. You're going to go with a list, and you're going to make your meals, and you're going to organize your food better so you feel better.
So I saw you on another television program with Dr. Sam Simon, who is, the head of Hudson Valley Fresh, is a consortium of 9 local family farms here in the Mid-Hudson region who make primarily dairy products. And he was talking about, you don't make a great living, you don't get rich being a farmer. You do it because it's a lifestyle. And part of Friends of the Farmer is taking kids and educating them about the possibility of becoming a farmer. Why do you want to do that?
We want to keep farmers farming. We want farmers to raise their replacement, and the only way that's going to work is if we consumers make food choices locally. And it is selfish why you're making those choices. It's taste, it's nutrition, it's all an experience that's great. But Sam is an integral part of putting together a consortium like that because they're paid more money. They're not paid base level of what milk costs. So actually, if we all source from them and they can get a volume, I call it the magic volume wand in my food entrepreneur hat of launching products. If you play into that volume, you will help them make money. It is farmer owned. They will get money back from it, and it tastes, their chocolate milk is dynamite. I live on it. It's a recovery drink, it's a breakfast, it's amazing. So Sam Simons is a good visionaire in that program, and I partnered with him because the kids said to me at the school, at the Harvest Club at Taconic Hills High School when I was writing my column, how do you get us better milk? We hate our milk. we want better milk. So Sam and I had a conversation. We had a conversation with the superintendent, and we decided Farm On Foundation, which is the benefactor of Friends of the Farmer, a nonprofit, could fund the difference so kids at school had better milk.
So in terms of turning them into future farmers, what kind of programs is Friends of the Farmer running along those lines?
So we're doing all kinds of educational programs. We're working with the school and Dr. Howard to try to figure out what's the best way to position education for viable livelihoods in agriculture. So one of those is working on a business program in the school where he has banned all junk food and fast food, I call it McDonald's, all the fast food after sports contests. So the idea is that the kids then can eat better, right? So we decided that connecting them by milk and going into other foods would be a better system.
So how does that program help kids become, how do your programs help kids become future farmers?
Okay, so the programs that we're doing, like funding the milk, and then we do a Camp Farm On, we're figuring out how viable livelihoods fit into our Hudson Valley lifestyle and living, right? And so we're funding programs, Camp Farm On, the kids go visit local ag businesses inside of a week, kids 14 to 18, they have to come up with profitable solutions for a Shark Tank that they then pitch to at the end of the week. So they not only learn planting, milking, all these basic farm tools, but they learn how to sustain the idea of profitability and making money and making a living, which is really important.
Terrific. Well, thanks for being here, Tessa.
Thanks, Jimmy.
That's it for this week's show. Thanks to Jennifer Schwartz-Berkey and Ajax Green from Rethink Local. Thanks to Cassandra Bean from the Ulster Literacy Association. And thanks to Tess Edick of Friends of the Farmer. Remember, all of our previous shows are available on the Kingston Now YouTube channel. And you can find that link on our Facebook page. For Kingston Now, I'm Jimmy Buff. We'll see you next time.